The sound of a small body hitting the dirty linoleum floor was louder than the thunder outside. It was a sick, heavy thud that stopped every fork and knife in the diner instantly. Then came the gasp. 6-year-old Lily was sprawled on the ground near booth 4. Her box of crayons scattered across the tiles like broken teeth. She wasn't crying yet. She was too shocked. She just looked up, eyes wide and terrified, at the man towering over her. He was tall. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the entire diner made in a month. He didn't look concerned. He looked annoyed. He brushed an invisible speck of dust off his trousers, looked down at the little girl he had just shoved aside, and sneered. "Watch where you are going, you little rat," the man spat. His voice was loud. He wanted everyone to hear. "If you dirty this suit, your mother is going to be paying for it for the next 10 years. The silence in the diner was thick enough to choke on. Sarah dropped the tray she was holding. It crashed onto a table, spilling hot coffee and ketchup everywhere. But she didn't care. She scrambled over the counter, her waitress uniform stained with sweat and grease. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Lily!" Sarah screamed. She fell to her knees beside her daughter, pulling the girl into her chest. She checked Lily's elbows. They were scraped red and raw. "Oh my God, Lily, are you okay? Did you hit your head?" Lily finally found her voice. She buried her face in Sarah's apron and began to sob. It was a high, thin sound that broke the hearts of everyone eating their lunch. Everyone except the man in the suit. He rolled his eyes. He checked his gold watch. "Great," he muttered. "Now, the noise starts. Hey, you." He snapped his fingers at Sarah. "Control your animal. I'm trying to close a deal on this call, and I can't hear myself think." Sarah looked up. Her eyes were red, filled with tears of humiliation and rage, but mostly fear. She needed this job. She needed the tips. Her landlord had already given her a final warning about the rent. She couldn't afford a fight. She couldn't afford to be brave. "I'm sorry, sir," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. She pulled Lily tighter. She knows she's not supposed to be in the aisle during the rush. She was just trying to get her drawing. "I don't care what she was doing," the man said. His name was Vince. You could tell he was the kind of man who had never been told no in his entire life. He took a step closer, looming over the mother and child on the floor. "This is a place of business, not a daycare for minimum wage screw-ups. Get her out of my face, or I'm calling the health department." From the back of the kitchen, the manager, Mr. Henderson, peeked out. He was a good man, but he was old and timid. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the anger. He stayed behind the swinging doors, looking down at his shoes. Sarah was on her own. "We're moving, sir. We're moving right now," Sarah said, scrambling to gather the crayons with one hand while holding Lily with the other. "Please, just give us a second." Vince laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. He reached out with his polished leather shoe and kicked the crayons further away, sending them skittering under the tables. "Leave the trash," Vince said. "Get me a refill on my coffee, and make sure it's fresh this time. The last cup tasted like dishwater." This kind of cruelty is hard to watch. If you believe everyone deserves respect, no matter their job, hit the like button right now. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Let's see how strong our community is. That was the breaking point. The cruelty wasn't just physical. It was designed to strip Sarah of her dignity in front of 30 people. She froze. She looked at the crushed crayon under his shoe. It was a drawing Lily had made, a picture of a house they didn't have yet. Sarah stood up. She was small, only 5 feet 4 inches, and tired. So tired. But she stood up. "You pushed a child," Sarah said. Her voice was shaking, but it was audible. "You hurt my daughter. You need to apologize." Vince paused. He looked around the diner, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at the truck drivers in the corner. He looked at the old couple by the window. He felt untouchable. Apologize? Vince stepped into Sarah's personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale cigars. "I think you're confused, sweetheart. You're the help. I'm the customer. The customer is always right. And right now, the customer thinks you and your brat are a waste of oxygen." He raised a finger, pointing it inches from her nose. Now go get my coffee before I have your boss fire you, and you end up on the street where you belong." Sarah flinched. She closed her eyes, waiting for the yell, waiting for the shame to swallow her whole. But the yell never came. Instead, there was a sound of a heavy ceramic mug being set down on the counter. It wasn't a slam, just a firm, deliberate placement. "That's enough," a voice said. It was a low voice, gravelly, like stones grinding together in a cement mixer. Vince turned around, annoyed at the interruption. "Excuse me? Who asked you to speak?" Sitting at the counter, 3 stools down, was a man everyone knew simply as Jack. He was a regular, but he never said much. He usually came in around 2 in the afternoon, ordered the meatloaf, and stared out the window at the rain. He wore a faded flannel shirt, jeans that were stained with oil and mud, and heavy steel-toed boots. He looked like he had been working for 40 hours straight. Jack didn't look at Vince. He was looking at his plate. He slowly wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, crumpled it into a ball, and dropped it onto his plate. Then, he spun his stool around. Jack wasn't just a worker. He was a wall of a man. Broad shoulders, thick arms covered in scars, and hands that looked like they could bend iron pipes. He stood up. He kept rising. He was 3 inches taller than Vince. "I said," Jack repeated, stepping between Sarah and the bully. "That is enough." Vince blinked. He took a half step back, his survival instinct kicking in for a split second before his arrogance overrode it. He looked Jack up and down, sneering at the dirty work boots. "Oh, look at this," Vince scoffed, playing to the room. "The White Knight arrives. What are you, the janitor? Go back to your slop, heavy metal. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me," Jack said. He didn't shout. He was terrifyingly calm. "Because I'm trying to eat, and I can't digest my food when I see a man wearing a $3,000 suit acting like a 2-cent punk." The diner went deadly silent again. Even the cook stopped scraping the grill. Vince's face turned a violent shade of red. His ego had just been slapped in public. He clenched his fists. "You watch your mouth, grease monkey. You have no idea who I am. I could buy this dump and turn it into a parking lot by tomorrow morning." "I don't care who you are," Jack said. He took 1 step forward. Vince took 1 step back. "I care about what you did. You put your hands on a little girl." Jack pointed a thick, calloused finger at the door. "Apologize to the lady. Apologize to the kid. Then get out." Vince laughed, but it sounded nervous this time. "Make me." It happened fast. Vince, trying to regain control, reached out to shove Jack, just like he had shoved Lily. Big mistake. Before Vince's hand could even touch the flannel shirt, Jack moved. His hand shot out like a cobra strike. He caught Vince's wrist in midair. Vince gasped. The sound of leather twisting filled the room. Jack didn't strike him. He simply squeezed. He squeezed the expensive wrist with the grip of a man who tightened lug nuts for a living. Vince's knees buckled. "Ow! Hey, let go! You're breaking it." "Am I?" Jack asked. His face remained stone cold. "It hurts when someone bigger than you pushes you around, doesn't it?" Jack twisted the arm slightly, forcing Vince down until he was on one knee, right next to the spot where Lily had fallen. "Apologize," Jack whispered. Vince was sweating now. The pain was real. Okay, I'm sorry, Jesus, let go." "Not to me," Jack said. He jerked his head towards Sarah and Lily. Vince looked up at Sarah, hate burning in his eyes, but fear burning hotter. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I didn't mean to push her. I'm sorry." Jack held him there for 3 full seconds. Long enough for the humiliation to sink into Vince's bones. Long enough for every person in the diner to see the big man kneeling on the dirty floor. Then, Jack released him. He shoved Vince toward the door with a casual flick of his arm. "Get out," Jack said, "and don't come back." Vince stumbled, catching himself on the doorframe. He clutched his wrist, his face pale and wild. He looked at Jack. He looked at the silent crowd. His dignity was gone, stripped away by a man in dirty boots. He opened the door, letting the cold wind and rain blow in. He didn't scream. He didn't make a scene. He just stared at Jack with a look of pure, concentrated venom. "You're going to regret that," Vince said softly. His voice was more dangerous now than when he was shouting. "You just made a very big mistake." Vince turned and walked out into the rain. He got into his black luxury car, but he didn't drive away. He just sat there. The engine didn't start. The brake lights stayed dark. Inside the diner, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by an uneasy quiet. "Thank you," Sarah breathed. She was still holding Lily, her hands shaking. "Thank you so much. Nobody has ever done that for us." Jack nodded once. He didn't smile. He's a bully. Bullies don't like it when the rabbit bites back. Jack turned and walked back to his stool. He sat down and picked up his fork, intending to finish his meal. But he didn't eat. He was looking out the window. 5 minutes passed. A second car pulled into the parking lot. A silver sedan with tinted windows. It parked right next to Vince's car. 2 minutes later, a pickup truck arrived. It blocked the exit lane. The mood in the diner shifted from victory to dread. The customers stopped eating. They whispered to each other, pointing out the window. It wasn't just Vince anymore. It was a gathering. Sarah walked up to the counter to refill Jack's coffee, but her hand froze when she looked outside. There were 4 men standing by the cars now. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing hoodies and leather jackets. They were smoking cigarettes, leaning against the hoods, and staring directly at the front door of the diner. They were waiting. "Jack," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Jack, look." Jack didn't look up from his coffee. "I see them. They're waiting for you," Sarah said. Tears pricked her eyes again. This was her fault. This kind stranger had defended her daughter, and now there was a pack of wolves waiting to tear him apart. "You can't go out there, there's too many of them. I'm calling the police." "No police," Jack said calmly. "And guys like that? They don't care about cops. They'll just come back for you and the kid tomorrow." He took a slow sip of his coffee. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $10 bill. He placed it on the counter. "Jack, please," Sarah begged. She reached out and touched his sleeve. "Don't go out there. Stay inside. We can lock the doors." Jack finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, but they were kind. "I can't stay in here forever, Sarah," he said. "And I'm not going to hide in a kitchen while they scare your little girl." Jack is about to risk everything for a stranger. Be honest. What would you do in this situation? Would you go out to face the mob, or would you stay inside and wait for the police? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. He stood up. He adjusted his flannel shirt. He cracked his knuckles. It was the sound of a man accepting his fate. He knew he wasn't going to win. He knew he was going to walk out that door and get hurt. Badly. But he was going to do it anyway. Because that's what a man does. Jack walked toward the door. The entire diner watched him. The silence was deafening. He put his hand on the handle. Sarah felt a surge of something hot and fierce in her chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was shame. Shame that she was letting him go alone. Shame that she was staying safe while he walked into the fire for her. Jack pushed the door open. The bell chimed, a cheerful sound that felt completely wrong for the violence that was about to happen. The heavy door swung shut behind Jack, cutting off the warmth of the diner. Outside, the rain was freezing. It was a cold, gray curtain that blurred the world. Jack didn't run. He didn't try to hide between the cars. He walked straight into the middle of the parking lot, his boots splashing in the puddles. He stopped 10 feet away from the group of men. There were 5 of them now. Vince stood in the middle, safe behind his hired muscle. He was smoking a cigarette, smiling like a shark that smelled blood. "I told you!" Vince shouted over the rain. "I told you it was a mistake to come out here." Jack stood his ground. He was soaked instantly. His flannel shirt clung to his broad shoulders. He looked calm, but his eyes were scanning them, calculating the odds. 5 against 1. He knew he wasn't going home in one piece. "Let's get this over with," Jack said. His voice was steady. "You want to feel big? Come and try." Vince flicked his cigarette at Jack. "Get him." The first 2 thugs rushed forward. They were young, fast, and angry. Jack was ready. He ducked under a wild punch and landed a solid right hook into the first man's ribs. The man groaned and doubled over. Jack shoved him into the second attacker. For a moment, just a heartbeat, it looked like Jack might actually win. He was fighting with the desperate strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. But then the numbers took over. A third man, heavy and built like a linebacker, tackled Jack from behind. They hit the wet asphalt hard. Jack struggled, throwing an elbow back, but the other two were on him instantly. A boot connected with Jack's stomach, then another to his shoulder. Inside the diner, the scene was playing out like a horror movie through the rain-streaked window. "Stop it!" Lily screamed. She pressed her small hands against the cold glass. "Mommy, they're hurting him! Make them stop!" Sarah stood frozen by the counter. Her heart felt like it had stopped beating. She watched as Jack, the stranger who had defended her honor for no reason, curled into a ball on the wet ground. He was trying to protect his head. He wasn't fighting back anymore. He was just trying to survive. Vince wasn't fighting. He was standing over Jack, laughing. He kicked Jack in the ribs once, twice. It was a cowardly, disgusting display of power. "Look at him," Vince shouted, pointing at the diner window. He wanted Sarah to see. He wanted everyone to see. "This is what happens. This is what happens when you forget your place." The customers in the diner looked away. The two truck drivers studied their coffee cups, shame burning their faces red. The old couple held hands, terrified. Mr. Henderson, the manager, was still hiding near the kitchen, wiping his sweating forehead with a rag. Nobody moved. The fear was a heavy blanket, suffocating them all. They were thinking, "If I go out there, I'll be next. Better him than me." But Sarah couldn't look away. She looked at Jack, lying in the mud, taking a beating that was meant for her. She looked at her daughter, Lily, who was watching her mother, waiting to see what grown-ups do when bad things happen. Something inside Sarah snapped. It wasn't a thought. It was a fire. If she did nothing, she wasn't just a victim. She was an accomplice. Sarah grabbed the nearest thing to her hand. It was a heavy glass bottle of ketchup from table 3. "Stay here, Lily," Sarah said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the trembling voice of a waitress anymore. It was the voice of a mother. "Mom?" Lily cried. "Stay right there. Do not move." Sarah didn't look at the customers. She didn't look at her boss. She marched to the door. She kicked it open so hard it banged against the wall. The bell chimed again. Sarah stepped out into the freezing rain. She didn't have a coat. Her uniform was thin, but she didn't feel the cold. She felt only rage. "Hey!" Sarah screamed. It was a primal, guttural scream that cut through the sound of the rain. The men stopped. Vince looked up, surprised. He saw the waitress standing on the sidewalk, holding a ketchup bottle like a grenade. "Get away from him!" Sarah yelled. She walked off the curb. She walked right toward the 5 men. "Get away from him right now!" Vince laughed. "Oh, look! The girlfriend is here to save the day. Go back inside, sweetheart, before you get hurt." I said move. Sarah didn't stop. She raised the heavy bottle. She was 5'4". They were giants. It didn't matter. One of the thugs stepped toward her, grinning. "What are you gonna do with that, lady? Put some flavor on my—" He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah hurled the bottle with every ounce of strength she had. It flew through the air and smashed into the thug's shoulder, exploding in a spray of red sauce and glass. The thug yelped and stumbled back, slipping on the wet pavement. "You crazy witch!" Vince shouted. "Grab her!" Sarah didn't retreat. She stood over Jack's prone body, spreading her arms wide. She became a human shield. "You want to touch him? You have to go through me," Jack groaned, trying to push himself up. His face was bleeding. "Sarah, go back." "No," she said, looking down at him. "You didn't leave us." "I'm not leaving you." Vince signaled his men. "Fine. She wants to be a hero? Teach her a lesson too." 2 men stepped forward. Sarah braced herself. She closed her eyes, ready for the hit. But suddenly, the diner door banged open again. "Hey!" It wasn't a scream. It was a bellow. Mr. Henderson, the 60-year-old manager, was standing in the doorway. He was shaking, terrified, his knees knocking together. But in his hands, he held a massive cast-iron frying pan from the kitchen. I called the police," Mr. Henderson shouted, his voice cracking. "They are on their way. You leave my employee alone." Mr. Henderson wasn't a fighter, but seeing Sarah, a young mother, standing alone in the rain had shamed him into action. He ran out into the rain, waving the frying pan like a madman. He stood next to Sarah, "You heard the lady," Mr. Henderson panted. "Back off." Vince looked at the old man and sneered. "A frying pan? Really? Is this a joke?" "No joke," a deep voice rumbled. The diner door opened a third time. The two truck drivers walked out. They were big men, heavy set, with arms like tree trunks. One of them was holding a tire iron he had pulled from his belt loop. The other was filming everything with his phone held high. "Smile," the trucker with the phone said. "You're live on the internet, tough guy. 3,000 people are watching you beat up a woman and an old man." The dynamic shifted instantly. Vince looked at the phone. He looked at the tire iron. He looked at the frying pan. And he looked at Sarah's fierce, unyielding eyes. The isolation was gone. Jack wasn't alone anymore. "We saw what happened inside," the trucker with the tire iron growled, stepping up beside Jack. He reached down and helped Jack to his feet. Jack swayed, dizzy, but he stood. "We sat there and did nothing, not anymore." More people were coming out. The old man from the window seat came out holding his cane like a club. A teenager from the back booth came out. They formed a semicircle around Jack and Sarah. A wall of ordinary people. A wall of witnesses. Vince stepped back. The rain was washing the arrogance off his face. He looked at his hired muscle. They looked nervous. Beating up one guy in a parking lot is easy. Fighting a mob of angry citizens while being live-streamed is a felony charge waiting to happen. "This isn't over," Vince stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Jack. "You hear me? I have lawyers. You have about 2 minutes before the sheriff gets here," the trucker said, checking his watch. "And I know Sheriff Miller. He doesn't like men who hit women. In fact, I think he hates them." The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance. Low at first, then getting louder. Approaching fast. Vince's face went pale. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was the prey. "Let's go," Vince hissed to his men. "Get in the car. Now." They scrambled. The tough guys who had been so brave 5 minutes ago were now tripping over each other to get to the safety of their vehicles. "Cowards!" Mr. Henderson yelled, banging his frying pan against a metal railing. "Don't come back!" Sarah didn't watch them leave. She turned immediately to Jack. He was leaning heavily on the trucker, blood dripping from a cut above his eyebrow, mixing with the rain. "Jack," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Jack tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. He looked at Sarah, then at Mr. Henderson, then at the wall of people who had come out into the storm for him. "I've been better," Jack rasped. "But I think the pests are gone." He looked down at Sarah. His eyes were swelling shut, but the kindness was still there. "You came out," he said softly. "You shouldn't have done that." "You came out first," Sarah replied, tears finally spilling over. The sirens were loud now. Blue and red lights flashed against the wet pavement, reflecting in the puddles. The cavalry had arrived to clean up, but the battle had already been won by the people standing in the rain. Vince slammed his foot on the gas pedal. His expensive black sedan fishtailed on the wet asphalt, screeching out of the diner parking lot onto the main highway. "Stupid hillbillies," Vince muttered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. His hands were shaking on the leather steering wheel. "They think they can scare me? I'll sue them all. I'll ruin that diner." He checked his rearview mirror. The parking lot was fading into the rain. No cars were following him. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He had escaped. The sheriff's station was 20 miles away. By the time the law arrived, Vince would be in the next county, sitting in his lawyer's office, twisting the story until he was the victim. He smirked. Too easy. But arrogance makes people blind. Vince was so focused on the road behind him that he didn't see what was waiting ahead. 2 miles down the road, parked on the muddy shoulder behind a billboard, was a state trooper patrol car. Officer Miller and his rookie partner had been finishing a coffee break when the dispatch call came through. Assault in progress at Joe's Diner. Suspect fleeing in a black luxury sedan. As Vince flew past them doing 80 in a 50 zone, Officer Miller dropped his coffee cup. "That's him," Miller said. "Light him up." The patrol car roared to life. Red and blue lights exploded into the gray afternoon. Vince saw the lights in his mirror and cursed. He thought about running. For a second, he actually considered it. But then he saw a second set of lights coming from the opposite direction. It was the sheriff's SUV, blocking the road ahead. Vince was trapped. He slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, spinning 180 degrees before coming to a stop in the ditch. Mud splashed over the pristine black paint. Vince scrambled out of the car, holding his hands up, putting on his best, misunderstood businessman face. "Officers! Thank God!" Vince yelled over the rain. "You have to help me! I was attacked! A maniac at the diner tried to kill me!" The sheriff, a big man with a face like weathered leather, stepped out of his SUV. He didn't look like he was in the mood for stories. He walked through the mud, ignoring Vince's expensive suit. "Save it," the sheriff said. "We got a call from a trucker. Said he has a video of you and 5 buddies beating on a single man." "That video is out of context," Vince stammered. "I am a respected member of the community. I demand—" "You demand the right to remain silent," the sheriff interrupted. He spun Vince around and slammed him against the hood of the car. The handcuffs clicked shut. It was the sweetest sound in the world. Assault. Reckless driving. And since that little girl got hurt, I'm tacking on child endangerment. The sheriff shoved Vince into the back of the cruiser. Vince watched through the wire mesh as his freedom and his reputation drove away in the rain. Back at the diner, the storm outside was quieting down, but the atmosphere inside was warm and busy. Paramedics had arrived, but they weren't rushing. Jack was sitting on the edge of the ambulance bumper, a thermal blanket draped over his shoulders. A medic was cleaning the cut above his eye. "You got a hard head, Jack," the medic joked, applying a bandage. "You'll have a nasty bruise and a headache for a week, but nothing's broken. You're lucky." "I don't feel lucky," Jack groaned, touching his ribs. "You should," a soft voice said. Jack looked up. Sarah was standing there. She was still wearing her stained waitress uniform, but she had dried her face. She was holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. "Here," she said, handing him one. "On the house." Mr. Henderson insisted. Jack took the mug with his bruised hands. The warmth seeped into his fingers. "Thanks. How is the little one?" Sarah looked back toward the diner entrance. Lily was sitting on a bench, surrounded by the truckers who were treating her like a princess. One of them was showing her pictures of his dog on his phone. She was laughing. "She's okay," Sarah said, her voice catching slightly. "She thinks you're Captain America." Jack chuckled, then winced. Captain America doesn't get beat up in a parking lot. "He does if he's outnumbered 5-1, Sarah said firmly. She sat down next to him on the ambulance bumper. The rain had turned into a light drizzle. "Why did you do it, Jack? You could have just eaten your meatloaf. You didn't have to step in." Jack took a sip of the cocoa. He looked at the steam rising from the cup. "I have a daughter, too," Jack said quietly. Sarah turned to look at him, surprised. "You do?" "Yeah. Her name is Emily. She's about Lily's age. She lives with her mom 2 towns over. I only get to see her on weekends." Jack looked down at his dirty work boots. "When I saw that guy push your little girl, I just saw Emily, and I knew that if someone did that to my daughter, I'd want someone to stand up for her." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. She looked at this man, bruised, tired, covered in grease and mud, and she realized he was the most decent man she had met in years. "Well," Sarah said softly, "you're a good dad, Jack. Emily is lucky to have you." Jack shrugged, embarrassed by the compliment. "I'm just a guy who fixes trucks." "No," Sarah said. She reached out and gently touched his arm, right above where the bandage ended. "You're the guy who stayed." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. It was the kind of silence shared by 2 people who have been through a war and survived. Mr. Henderson popped his head out of the diner door. "Sarah, police need a statement, and Jack, when you're done bleeding on my parking lot, your meatloaf is getting cold." Jack smiled. It was a real smile this time. "I guess I should go finish that." He started to stand up, but he groaned as his ribs protested. Sarah was there instantly, her hand on his back to steady him. "Easy, Tiger," she teased. "Let me help you." They walked back toward the diner together. As they reached the door, Jack stopped. "Hey, Sarah." "Yeah?" Jack rubbed the back of his neck, looking suddenly nervous, more nervous than he had been fighting 5 guys. "Next weekend, when I have Emily, maybe I could bring her here, for burgers. I think she and Lily would get along. Maybe they could, I don't know, be friends, Like sisters? Sarah looked at him. She saw the hope in his eyes. She thought about the empty chair at her dinner table. She thought about how safe she felt standing next to him. She smiled. I think Lily would love that. And I think I would too. Jack let out a breath of relief. Okay, great. Next Saturday then. Next Saturday, Sarah agreed. She opened the door for him. The bell chimed, but this time it sounded welcoming. Inside, the diner erupted in applause as Jack walked in. The truckers clapped him on the back. The old couple waved. Even Lily looked up and beamed. Jack limped back to his stool, sat down, and picked up his fork. The meatloaf was cold, but as he looked at Sarah pouring him a fresh coffee, he thought it was the best meal he had ever had. Sometimes, the worst days of your life end up being the beginning of the best ones. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of inspiration. Remember, real heroes don't wear capes. They just show up when it matters. If you enjoyed this story, I think you'll like these on screen. Click and see now.